Okay, section 3.1. We are looking at decimals of numbers between integers. And what we're going to do with these is we're going to learn how to make and graph on a number line like this. So we're going to be able to take and find numbers in between. Let's say this is -5, -4, -3, -2, -1. We're going to find out how to graph them on a number line like this. These are integers. And we're also going to be able to make a graph, coordinate plane, X, Y graph, and graph them. Okay, graph them on that. Okay, so remember we've made our X and our Y graphs before. This is always the Y, this is always the X. Then we have to make sure our intervals are very consistent. So if I go up by 1, I have to continually go up by 1, I can't jump. Okay. And I would still have to go down by 1 on the other side because this is all the same axes. We can't change our interval. However, we can change the intervals if we want on the other axis. So if instead of I want to make the tick marks and they are for 2, 4, 5, or 6, I'm going up by 2s, and -2, -4, -6, -8, okay? So we can change them on the axis as long as on one axis they're always the same. And then we can graph them from that. So that's our goal, is plotting decimal numbers between integers. And so if we have fractions, we're going to make them into decimal numbers. If we have other things, we're going to put them into numbers. Okay. So let's start. If we are looking at some numbers and we want to graph them, I'm going to give you -1/3, -0.3, 0, 1/2, 2.4, and -1.6. So we're going to try to graph each of these onto the same number line. So the first thing we might want to do is put them in order from smallest to largest. Okay? So the first thing I like to do when I'm doing this is change all numbers into decimals. I have fractions here, and so we need to change those into decimals. I can do that by taking 1 and dividing it by 3. That will give you 0.3 repeating if you do it on your calculator. This one is already said it's -0.3. All right. This one is 0. This one, if I divide it 1 by 2, it gives me 0.5. This one's already written as a decimal. This one's written as a decimal. Okay. So if I were to look on a number line, I guess actually making the number line will help you to figure out which is smaller. Let's put our 0 in the middle. I'm going to mark it with numbers that are just integers. So I'm going to use just one step for each integer. So the interval is going to be the same. So this will be +1, +2, +3, +4, +5. Going backwards, it's -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. That's because as I go this direction, we are getting smaller and the negatives indicate we're going to the left of our 0. Positives always go in the right direction, negatives always go in the left direction. And as we go, these get smaller and smaller. So if I look at my number line, these are smaller and they continually get bigger this direction. So when you start at the left, read to the right, you get larger and larger numbers. Okay. So in this case, I'm going to plot 0. So I'm going to plot it down here. Okay, that one is very easy. It's on 0. The rest are not. Okay, these look the same, but in reality, this is negative 0.3333, and it continues on. So that number is actually smaller than this number, because if I go to 0.3, that's about right here. So this is negative okay guys, negative 0.3. This one's actually negative 0.33 or 333. So it's just right past that one. So it's actually a smaller number because it's negative. So this here is negative 0.33 repeating. It's a little bit smaller, smaller than negative 0.3. Then we have 0. These are actually almost written in the right order. We have 0.5, that's positive. That's right here. So this is 0.5. Okay. 2.4, that goes up 2, and then basically about almost 5, but not quite, so that's 2.4. Think of cutting these into 10 pieces. We're on the 4th one. This is a negative 1. So a negative 1, and then I have to go, like, if there's 10 pieces, I have to go 6 of them, so a little bit over a half. So that's negative 1.6. So now if I were to write these from smallest to largest, it would be negative 1.6, negative 0.33, negative 0.3, 0 right here, 0.5, and 2.4. So this is going from smallest to largest. Because we're reading from left to right, and we read that right off the number line from smallest to largest. Okay. So that's one of the ways you can compare decimal numbers. That's a way that you can order them from smallest to largest, and it's also how you graph them on your number line. So the next thing we're going to do is look at how we would graph these on an XY coordinate plane. Okay, so if we looked at our XY coordinate plane, X is always horizontal, and I'm going to just do it by ones here on the X-axis. So we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, going back, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. I'll go to negative 5. We're going to go up by ones on the Y. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 going down. So that's negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5. Okay, so when we plot these, our point is always given as the X value, comma, the Y value. So if I say 0 on X, that means I don't go any direction on X. I stay here. And if I say 1.5 here, that's between, it's halfway between 1 and 2. So we go on to this and we put the point, we're going to call this point A, we're gonna put point A right there because I went 0 in the x direction. I did go positive 1.5. So if I have something like negative 1/2 and positive 1/3, okay? If you need to change these, this is negative 0.5. You can do them in the calculator. This is 0.33 repeating, so indicate it's repeating here. And then you go down, or you go back -5, back that direction, and we're gonna go up to 0.33, which is right about here. So our point will be right there. It has an x value of negative 0.5 and a y value of about 0.3, which is right there. So we could call this point B, and I could label this point B. So that's basically how we're going to use the decimals to graph, and we can look at those on coordinate planes and on other numbers, okay? The other thing we're going to look at, and again, you could graph these, but one of the things that you have to think about is comparing decimals. I think the easiest is to actually graph them. I'm going to give you a couple ways to look at them. So if they're negative, you think backwards. The larger the absolute value, of the number is smaller and smaller. Okay, so if I have negative 0.35 compared to negative 0.32, if I look at these, 0.35 is larger than 0.32, so this is the smaller number. It's backwards. We normally think 0.35 is bigger than 0.32, so this is the larger. So it's always backwards of what you think. If I were comparing 0.35 with normal 0.32, 32 hundredths is bigger than 35, or 35 hundredths is bigger than 32 hundredths. So this would be my smaller, and this would be my larger. So it's always kind of a backwards thought process when you're dealing with negative numbers. Think of it in the positive numbers and then just reverse what you think it is in positive numbers, and that will give you the comparison. Okay, so that will be things you'll be working on for section 3.1.